Welcome back, or if it's your first time, I'm glad to have you here. I'm Matt Fendora, and you're tuned in to the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, where we journey together toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Using mind, body, heart, and spirit as the anchors of our podcast, join me as we set sail into the depths of self-discovery, unraveling the interconnected layers that shape our growth. If you resonate with today's conversation, consider subscribing to the podcast. Your support means the world to us and ensures you never miss an empowering episode. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, the podcast all about being the best version of yourself through mind, body, heart, and spirit. Today, I am here with Nicole Runyon. Nicole Runyon is an esteemed psychotherapist renowned for her expertise in child and adolescent mental health, backed by an extensive 20-year career in the field. Her specialization lies in this particular population, where she has emerged as a prominent authority. Nicole's profound understanding of technology's impact on mental health, child development, and the intergenerational variations in parenting has made her a highly sought-after speaker. Her engaging presentations on these subjects have captivated large audiences, cementing her reputation as an expert in the field. Some of Nicole's proudest accomplishments include being a mother to her 2 children, helping her clients live healthy and thriving lives, and pushing herself past her comfort zone to speak to large audiences about kids of this generation. What makes Nicole's heart sing? Connecting to her people. Without further ado, here's Nicole. How are you doing today, Nicole?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited. We connected through Miriam, who we've had on here before, and I know that you guys are doing your webinar, which I'll get to that near the end and discuss what that entails and whatnot. But one of my first questions is, what is psychotherapy, and why did you choose to get involved with that?
Psychotherapy is really a broad term for helping individuals, couples, families reflect on what it is that might be causing a problem, causing a dysfunction, keeping them stuck. And once you have that awareness, then you can start to build trust in yourself to work through whatever it is that's preventing you from moving forward. And under that umbrella, there are various modalities used to be able to help someone with that. But mainly, a therapist's job is to, in a sense, get out of the way and hold the space or hold a mirror in front of the person so that they can see what they need to see, and then they can decide how to solve their problem.
So what's the difference between a psychotherapist and just a regular therapist?
Well, psychotherapy is a term, like I say, it's a broad term because in recent, I would say in the last couple of decades, there are many disciplines that go into, that you can focus on that go into being a therapist. So you could go the psychology route, and you could do like a master's in psychology or a PhD in psychology. You could go the counseling route and you could be a licensed professional counselor. You could go the social work route and be a licensed master level social worker. And any of those disciplines will allow you to be a therapist or a psychotherapist.
So why, of all the things that were out there, why did you choose that being a psychotherapist was the thing for you?
Well, for me, I always say it's a calling because when I was 8, I had told myself, I don't even know how I knew what a child psychologist was, but I knew. And I said, well, I'm either going to be a child psychologist or a pediatrician because I knew I really loved kids. I was the oldest of 5 kids, the second oldest on both sides for all of my cousins. And I just was always surrounded by little kids and I loved them. And so at that point, I was like, well, I'm either going to be a psychologist or a pediatrician. And my youngest brother was born almost when I was almost 9. By the time I was 10, he was a toddling toddler. And I will never forget that he fell down one day outside and scraped his knee. And I helped him, clean the wound and put antiseptic cream on it, put a Band-Aid on it. And the whole time I had this like gut wrenching feeling. And it wasn't like a weak in the knees at the sight of blood. I don't really mind the sight of blood. It was really actually, I look back and I think it was empathy. And in that moment, I knew, well, I can't be a pediatrician. It's just too much for me. So I'm going to be a child psychologist. So at 10 years old, that's how I knew what I wanted to do. And then I have this box of mementos from like my childhood, and I was going through it a few years ago, and in it there's a yearbook from eighth grade, and in the yearbook they had the eighth graders do like a profile on themselves. And one of the questions in the profile is, where do you see yourself in 10 years? So here I am, I think I was 13, and I said, in 10 years, I'll be studying to be a child psychologist.
Wow. And look at you now. Like you've taken that and like you've gone even beyond that because you've had these speaking engagements where you're teaching other people essentially what you're teaching the kids. Now you're just expanding that to other people now too.
That's right. Yeah. It really just, like I say, it really is a calling because I feel called to do this work. I was finding that just being one-on-one was just not enough. Frankly, it takes too long with kids because with kids, you have to build a rapport with them first, and then you have to get ready to then build a rapport with the parents. And by then, because you really do ideally need the parents involved. But by then, their behavior is out of control, whatever they, came in with, maybe their grades are slipping or, there's major problems. Those problems are still continuing. And so in an effort to remedy that, I've made a couple of changes. One is that I strictly work with parents now. I don't do psychotherapy with kids because I find that actually coaching parents makes everybody get better faster. The parents have more control and power, I think, than they realize. And what I learned is that about 70% of my practice were kids who were really just being scapegoated, pathologized, told, hey, you're the one with the problem. And really, it could be a myriad of things. It could be that they're on too much screen time. They don't have proper nutrition. There's a family system problem. And so I said, you know what? Not that those 30% of kids aren't important, but those 30% of kids would be better served if I started to make this change, that I can't have these kids whose parents really could use the help taking up spots for those kids who actually really do need the psychotherapy.
Hmm.
So I made that change, and then I decided I wanted to speak to large audiences to get that message out there because it breaks my heart that there's this huge mental health crisis among our children. ERs are overflowing with mental health cases with adolescents. They're not designed to deal with that. They don't know how to deal with that, and there's nowhere to send these kids because psychiatric hospitals, there's not enough of them. There's not enough of us private practice therapists, that's for sure. I've been turning away families for years, which breaks my heart, but I can only take so many. I'm only one person.
Hmm.
And that goes for every private practice therapist. We're all at capacity. And so in an effort to sort of change that whole system, I want parents to know they actually can make changes that will prevent their kids from having these mental health problems. And then again, that the rest of the kids who really do have, they have trauma, maybe they have like just a chemical setup from day one where they struggle, there'll be spots and there'll be availability for them to get the help they need.
Hmm. I feel like one of the difficulties in teaching one-on-one or taking care of the child one-on-one is you could be potentially taking that child and putting them right back into the problem because that problem that they might be having is a family-oriented problem. And if you don't focus on that problem, while it might help them it's short term, they're going to go right back into whatever it is that they're dealing with. And it's just going to be just this wheel of going back and get better, get worse, get better, get worse.
100%, and that's what was happening. I would see changes, and I would see them, and it's so inspiring because, to your point, it's so much of it really isn't in their control. But I would see them learn self-control. I would see them learn how to express and communicate their feelings. I would see them not avoid their difficult issues and be uncomfortable. But then, so then they would get better, and then you're right, they would go right back in. And it took too long to get the parents to understand, hey, you have to be a part of this. And
Mm,
again, it took a long time for the kids to understand that, hey, if I bring your parents in, it's not so we're going to be this diatribe, talking about you and being critical of you. It's so that I can help them help you. But again, that takes a long time. And many people don't have the bandwidth for that. They leave therapy before they're done for that reason.
mm.
And that was going on for years in my practice. And I thought, okay, what am I missing? What is going on? I knew that it was something I had to change because they're coming to me with this intention, and that's what I'm offering them. So I need to offer them something different.
So if you have parents that come to you now, since now that you're focusing on parents, what does a successful session look like with parents?
Well, just off the bat, they know that uh, they have to take some ownership and responsibility for what's going wrong. So that energy in the room really can go a long way. And so what we do is we brainstorm. Well, first I get the social history, like I always do. Was there trauma? Was there something that we can pinpoint as to, okay, this is when the problem started and here's why? And then we go from there. And so we start brainstorming and we start working together on what changes they need to make. Do they need to cut back on screen time? Do they need to, is there, is there a social media problem? Is there a cyberbullying problem? Is there a, like, you know, uh, is it technology related? Yeah, that's always a part of it. If the kid is exposed to tech, that's not the only thing, but it's definitely a modality for them to avoid their discomfort. And then we start kind of going through. A lot of parents today, I call it the culture of parenting. A lot of parents today are afraid to make their kids uncomfortable, mainly because they're afraid to be uncomfortable.
Hmm.
It's painful, to watch your kid go through pain. But children really need to go through pain in their development because it's growing and it's maturity, and that's how you get there. So I do a lot of work with parents on that. It's just, what does it feel like to have your kid struggle, and how can I help you with that? So sometimes it does even kind of turn into some psychotherapy with the parents, because chances are there's something in their past that's unresolved that's preventing them from letting their kids grow.
Hmm. Is the thing that they're dealing with most likely some kind of traumatic event?
No, not necessarily. I think most people actually I think everybody has some issue, right? I mean, nobody comes out of their childhood unscathed, even if Mary Poppins is your mother. So I think not necessarily, sometimes sure, but sometimes it's really just they didn't realize that it's something that's unresolved for them. And they kind of went into their adulthood with survival mechanisms, because we all do, and we're all pretty resilient to things. And so it's just really a matter of awareness. Hey, you're doing this because you didn't resolve this. And it can be pretty simple of how they can resolve it. And like I say, they're usually very open to that because they're coming in with the intention of, okay, I need to make this change. And that's really empowering, right, for them, that they don't feel like, oh, my child is diseased, my child is ill, please help us. It's really more, oh, I can help us through understanding.
Hmm. What tools do you provide parents in handling those unresolved issues?
Well, it depends on how severe it is. So to your point, if it's something that was rooted in trauma, then chances are they need psychotherapy. So we determine together, is that something they want? Is that something they're interested in? And if it is it going to be me, or do I need to refer that out? And it's a case by case thing.
One of the things that you mentioned was the impact that it has on the mental health of kids, adolescents, teenagers, and younger kids. Um, what challenges are they facing now?
You mean this generation of kids?
Yes.
Yes. Well, they've got a lot going on, unfortunately. They're inundated with media every second of their day. So there's social media, the gaming, they have devices in their pocket. The school is requiring them to be on a device for schoolwork, for studying, for homework. TV is streaming, so it's nonstop. You know, if you watched a show, then you're going to watch the other show in succession. It's not like when we were kids and you had to wait for the next episode the next week.
Hmm.
Or sometimes you had to wait a month because they put reruns on for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you know, there's something to be said for that, right? Like we learned how to tolerate patience and how to wait for things. Well, the kids of today don't have that. They have everything at their fingertips that they could possibly desire. And and that's not the only problem. I don't 100% blame tech. Like I said, I think it's a modality that we can use to keep them comfortable. It's really up to the parents to to help them experience life, not just the ease of technology. So they have that, you know, kind of to contend with this generation. And they also have um, a massive amount of pressure on them to, how do I say it, perform because everybody's watching.
Mhm.
So, you know, they have to be on their best behavior. They have to be good. They have to look good all the time. You know, I often think about all the dumb things that I did when I was a kid or a teenager because I just didn't know any better and it wasn't recorded. And if it was recorded, I would be mortified.
Hmm.
And these kids today, you know, everything is being recorded from day one, from the early part of their lives, because their parents are recording them.
So do you feel like the fear of judgment is a significant impact on them?
Absolutely. I think, you know, part of growing up is being insecure. And that's a developmental rite of passage and a necessity to feel. Because if you don't feel it, then you don't work through it and you don't get to the other side of it. And so what's happening is they are naturally insecure, but then they're being, again, recorded and on display from the minute they're born. And so they never really get to work through that insecurity because they're always questioning themselves and they're always being compared to somebody else or something else.
So do you think that we should slow down our recording then of our kids?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting. My kids are 10 and 15, and so I often find my husband and I actually both often find ourselves looking at old videos of them, just being nostalgic and missing, you know, their little voices. And a couple of times, both of them have said in the videos, "Are you recording me? Don't record me." And we didn't put them on social media. I mean, that
Hmm.
wasn't a thing that we did. We just made that decision. Um, so it wasn't like they knew they were being put out there in the world. They simply didn't like that we were recording them. I don't know, you know, I look back and I think, well, they must have felt insecure and they just didn't want to be on display. And, you know, so often we just thought it was no big deal because we grew up. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the camcorders were that was like the hot thing. Everybody had a camcorder and, you know, we have old movies of me and my siblings and we love them and we just think they're hilarious. And, but, you know, there's a handful of movies of us, whereas our kids today, they're being, every aspect of their lives is being recorded.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, our generation, we're not recognizing how it's not it's not as benign as it was when we were kids.
How do we help kids with those insecurities?
Well, I think we need to be talking to them about it for sure because they're not aware. Most kids, especially early on, they don't even have the vocabulary for how they feel. There's like
Mm-hmm.
over 40 feelings, right? And we teach them, we do a really good job of teaching them their ABCs and their one, two, threes, but we don't do a good job of actually saying, hey, this feeling, there's a word for it.
Mm-hmm.
You feel embarrassed. You feel disgusted. You feel, angry. Most kids know mad and sad, but they don't know a lot of the other feelings behind what could be making you mad and sad. So that's one thing we can do. And then once we teach them the vocabulary, then we're telling them, hey, it's okay to talk about it. Because a lot of kids, they internalize it and then they act it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's they acted out, aggressively or tantrumy, or they get shy or retreat inward or withdraw. They're acting it out. They're showing us in their behavior how they feel. So we need to make it okay to talk about so that once it comes out of your mouth, it becomes something you have to deal with and manage. And that's hard,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a good thing. We
Mm-hmm.
want them to do that hard thing. We don't want them to avoid it by the use of a screen or by giving them what they want because they need to get to the other side of it. Once you're on the other side of it, you build that. Once you can build that tolerance, you can look back and you can say, wow, look what I did. And that feels really good and that builds resiliency.
Mm-hmm. I definitely see that with all three of my kids, the different reactions to their emotions. I've got one that's really aggressive. I have one that just gets really upset. And then for whatever reason, my son is the one who labels it. He'll get upset and then he'll label, "Hey, what's going on, bud? Oh, I'm upset." "Oh, okay. What are you upset about?" And he'll explain to you what happened. And you're like, "Oh, okay." And you can work through it by just giving him a minute and then asking him how you feeling, and he'll actually label the feeling for you and talk it out.
That's so great. That's really awesome.
So when it comes to the technology piece, what are some of the positive and negative aspects that impact our children?
Well, I think we have to talk about ages if we're talking about positive and negative, because I don't really see much positive from introducing technology screens, any of that to young children. In fact, it's really to their detriment, and there's nothing good that can come out of it because it really does impede on every developmental process, and so much developmentally is happening early on. If you think about 90% of brain development is happening before the age of 6. So we really don't want to be giving them anything to hinder that or get in the way of that early on. As they age, something positive that could come out of it is they learn how to use it as a tool. We obviously, all of us adults are using technology for our jobs and it can really help us. And if there was no technology, you and I would have never met. And so we can teach them how to use it, how to use PowerPoint, how to use, Excel spreadsheets, how to, if we want to teach them anything about social media, we want to teach them how to use it to meet people that will help serve their purpose. So we might want to be teaching them how to use it professionally, later on in their lives. But again, I don't recommend introducing that until high school because before that, there's so much that they need to go through. And again, it's hard. It's development is painful. So we really want to just give them all opportunity to go through that so they can build their sense of confidence. Their confidence should be built by 12 from a social emotional standpoint. And that's because from 12 to 18, they should be building their identity, who they are, their likes and dislikes, their character traits. But if they're not confident, then they can't identify who they are and they're going to really struggle. And then 25 is when the brain is fully developed. So from 18 to 25 is when they're really solidifying who they are. But so many of our kids today, our Gen Zers, are really struggling because they didn't develop that confidence early on because of technology and the culture of parenting. They weren't allowed to work through the hard things earlier on in their childhoods. So then they don't know who they are and they don't know what they want, and they're really struggling. They're struggling to make decisions. They're struggling to function. Many of them can't even make a simple phone call to inquire about something. They're scared to do that. They're not driving. They just don't know how to trust themselves and rely on themselves. So as far as the negative effects, I think they far outweigh anything positive from introducing it too young.
Mhm. What can we do to help them build confidence?
Well, that starts actually from, birth. So I'll talk about that, but then I'll also give suggestions for parents who might be listening, whose kids are obviously not babies and who feel like it may be too late, because it's never too late.
Mhm.
But the reason why I say it starts at birth is because child development works like stages. One builds on the one before it. And so if we didn't go through the stage very well, then we're going to really struggle with the next stage. And so confidence building is from 5 to 12, but we really want to have 0 to 5 go well so that the confidence phase can go well. So from 0 to 18 months, we have babies who are in the attachment phase of development. And I'm going to go through this really briefly because this would be like a whole day seminar. There's so much there. So with attachment, it's baby has a need, caregiver responds, that builds the trust. And that trust is going to extend into relationships later on. So it's a really important setup early on. So if they have attachment, they can go to the next phase, which is between 18 months and 3, and that's the will and authority stage. And that's what we call, the terrible twos with the no and the fits and the tantrums. And that's actually a necessary phase, because if I trust my caregiver, I can tell them I have a boundary and my boundary is no. Now the parent has to be able, and this is where a lot of parents are going wrong these days, they have to be able to meet that no and say, hey, I hear your no, but my no is more important because my no actually protects you from yourself, right?
Mm.
No, you cannot run in the street because you will get hit by a car. And so, not that I'm saying parents today are letting their kids do that. I'm saying they're struggling with their boundaries. They're struggling with that balance, because it is a balance. You do want to hear your 2-year-old's boundary. You want to hear their no, but you also want to meet them with your strong parental authority because it's to protect them and they need that boundary from you. So it's a delicate balance. And I think parents are struggling with the balance. They're overindulging their 2-year-olds, which is why I hear from a lot of parents these days who say, actually, it's not the terrible twos, it's the terrible threes,
Mm.
because they're going into 3 not having had that balance of boundary, and they want more because they didn't respect their parents' authority. So then from 3 to 5 is autonomy and independence. So if I trust my caregiver, if I can respect their boundary and feel like my boundary is heard, then I'm ready to do things like tie my shoes and go to preschool and separate from mom and dad for a little bit of time. So you have a lot of kids in this phase of development that have separation anxiety. They don't know how to do things for themselves. Ideally, you do want to help them learn in this stage how to get themselves dressed and zip up, their coats or button things and use their fine motor, because the bones in the hands don't fuse together until the age of 6. So these are actually very frustrating tasks that need to happen so that they come out of it feeling like they have trust in themselves. But often in this stage, kids are really struggling with tantrums. They're struggling with power struggles with their parents. And it's because they're not getting enough independence. And
Mm.
so if I have, again, attachment, boundaries, autonomy and independence, then I'm ready at 5 to start building my confidence.
Mhm.
And that goes for all of the school age years, 5 to 12. Now, confidence doesn't come from everybody gets a trophy, everybody wins, and this is where we're going wrong with this generation. We're not helping them work through hard things. School is hard. School starts getting hard, around first grade. And that's good. We want them to be challenged. We want them to struggle a little bit because, again, we want them to say, wow, look at me. I did that, and be proud of themselves inside. So again, so many times in these ages, 5-year-olds are on iPads. 9-year-olds have their own smart device. Some 10 and 11-year-olds are on social media. So we're really we're getting in the way of all of those intricacies of the developmental process. Now, I only just explained social emotional development. There's also physical development, with which a lot of these kids today aren't getting because they're inside on a screen and they're not outside climbing trees and running and jumping.
Mhm.
And then there's the brain development. So again, that's one piece of child development that I'm saying, look at how it's being infiltrated with technology and parenting kind of getting in the way of that process. But there's all these other facets too that
Mhm.
we need to be cognizant of.
So let's say that someone struggled as a parent and didn't necessarily hit each one of those marks and starting building their confidence at 5. As an adolescent, how can a parent help their child gain that confidence?
Yes, good question, because I was going to go through that, right? I kind of forgot because I can get off on this tangent about development. I love it. Okay, so if confidence didn't happen, or if they're struggling with confidence in those years they're supposed to be building it, what parents can do is help them work through hard things. So find the holes in their development where you're letting them off the hook, or things are too easy, or they want to quit and you said, okay, sure, you can quit, and help them work through it. So I don't mean throw them in the deep end and wash your hands of it and just, hope for the best. I mean, talk to them about it, explain to them why it's important to not quit or to work through something hard. And they might resist you. Most likely they will, if they're anything like my oldest child. But you have to be consistent and you have to be willing to kind of go to bat for them in that way, because that's what they need from you. They don't know that there's so many benefits to it, so they're going to resist and fight it. But you as the parent has to be stronger than them in the way that you help them. You hold the space for them to do it. So what that means is you can, again, communicate, have lots of conversation about it. You could offer assistance. What I typically do is suggest to parents, and I do this myself, is ask your kids, what can I do to help? What do you need? What do you need from me? So, and I don't mean like you do it for them. I mean, you support and assist based on what they're saying they would like from you.
So let's say that your child is more, let's say, introverted or reserved. Do you have a technique that helps get that conversation started?
Yeah, I think some kids don't want to experience the pain of expressing how they feel because, like I said, once it comes out, it becomes real
Hmm.
and you have to do something about it. So I would recommend that parents put that on the table, just say it, just communicate it. Yeah, this is hard to talk about. You could even use an example of something that was hard for you to talk about or hard for you to do. So you're modeling and showing them, hey, I've been there and I'm here to support you, but there's no way around it. You can't avoid it.
Hmm.
And sometimes, depending on the age, if the kids are older, I'm all about natural consequences. So, for example, if they're holding something in and it's affecting their grades, all of a sudden their grades start dropping. Hopefully if they're a conscientious student, they'll recognize, hey, I don't like this. I don't want this consequence. And then as long as the parents are talking to them and saying, hey, listen, your grades are dropping, something's up. When you're ready to talk to me, let me know. I'm here for you. That could be a really good way for an older kid to really kind of just work through it and have no choice but to face it.
Is there anything that parents can do to help their children navigate that digital landscape, whether that's social media or TV or internet, anything like that?
I mean, I advocate for waiting as long as possible to introduce any of that. So I'll give specifics. I don't think anyone under 18 should be on social media.
Mm.
I think it's just quite clear. I mean, I don't know if you saw any of the congressional hearings on the Child Safety Act, but it's becoming quite clear that social media is not safe for kids, and we really can't trust big tech or the government, in my opinion, to really regulate that because this has been going on for 10 years. And
Hmm.
where was the government 10 years ago to safeguard kids? So I simply think parents need to take ownership and responsibility for just knowing that no one's going to keep your kids safe but you. And there's absolutely no reason to be on it in their childhoods or their teen years. There are far more harms than good from it. Um, and then as far as other media, I suggest before high school, there shouldn't be any smart devices before high school, iPads, tablets, iPhones, because by the time they get to high school, they're more mature enough to have those conversations with you on how to manage it responsibly, how to have limits, how to be appropriate with group messaging or texting. If they've developed the way that they need to, if their social emotional development's intact, if their brain development's intact, then they're more likely to be able to manage all of it because it's a lot to manage. It's a lot to manage for us adults. And then as far as TV or like video games or whatever, I suggest having those be in family spaces, like no TVs or gaming in the bedrooms. One, because I think parents should be monitoring the content of what their kids are doing. And two, because it's easier to have limits if it's in a public space. And three, because it can be considered a family activity. So you could do like family movies, and then you're not using it for like that addictive purpose where you're streaming a show and you're binge watching it. You know, it's a movie and it has a beginning and an end, and the family watches it together. And, you can kind of talk about it afterwards and laugh about it or reference it, later on because you all shared in it together.
Hmm.
I would say that's a better way to manage media earlier on in childhood. I think anybody under two should have zero media, even TV. It's again because so much development is happening. And so much of that attachment where they need the eye contact and they need the attunement from the caregiver because that's the phase of development they're in.
Hmm. So let's say that a parent went against what you said and decided to allow social media during high school. Is there anything as a parent that we can do to, let's say, soften the blow of that negative impact?
Sure, I think take it away. And this is where I know we laugh because well, first of all, it's so obvious. But
Hmm.
second, it seems impossible, I think, for most parents. They feel like Pandora's box has been open, and now it's too late. Well, it's never too late, because you're still in charge. You're still the safeguard for them, while they still are with you and they're still growing and developing. So it'd be like, for example, it'd be like if your kid was showing signs of addiction, right? Maybe they got into vaping or drinking early on in their teen years. Would you just let them continue on, or would you take it
Mhm.
away and get them help?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I don't see it any different. There's no line for me between vaping, alcohol, drugs, and social media early on in childhood. Their brains are still developing, and it's a substance. It's a
Hmm.
substance.
Yeah.
And we really do want them to have as fully developed brains as possible before introducing it. It's the reason why we have age limits on drugs and alcohol.
So you think we should set that it should be an age limit of you can't have social media like as a federal mandate or a state mandate. You can't have it until you're 18.
Yeah, so that's always a sticky thing for me. I tend to steer away from government regulations because I don't think it's the government's job to keep us safe. I think it's their job to protect our freedom.
Hmm.
And so I think we have to take personal responsibility for ourselves. It's like saying, I'm all about nutrition. That's one of my pillars that I talk about in terms of kids and their mental health and how they develop. So it's like saying, well, the government should ban all sugary sodas. I don't look, if you want to drink sugary soda, that's up to you.
Hmm.
That's not up to me to tell you not to do, but I'm not going to do it because I know it makes me feel terrible. And so I take responsibility for myself and my health, and I take responsibility for my kids' health. And so I don't think it's up to anyone to tell us what to do. I think parents need to recognize, hey, this isn't good for my kid. I'm just going to say no. And I'm going to stay strong in my no, even though it makes me uncomfortable because they're uncomfortable. Because they're going to come to you and they're going to say, well, all my friends, and then I won't have any friends. And do you know what my son said? He's 15. He said, if I don't have Snapchat, I'll never get a girlfriend.
Wow.
Well, I called BS on that. One, because he's very handsome, and I'm not being biased, but two, because we taught him how to go up to a girl and say hello and ask for her number. And that is a rite of passage, right? That's
Hmm.
uncomfortable. That's hard for a boy to do. But we want him to learn how to do that. We want him to be uncomfortable so that he can get past that. And what do you know? There's a girlfriend and she's very lovely. And they just went to the winter formal together. And it's all wonderful. And he met her through a friend, like
Hmm.
in real life, not on Snapchat. So when your kids come to you, and believe me, my husband almost caved about the Snapchat thing. And I stood strong because I knew that like if he did that, he wouldn't ever learn how to push past that discomfort of actually going up to a girl in person. It's
Hmm.
much easier to press a button,
Yeah.
right? To say, oh, I like you. And then they start talking and they don't even meet in person. Some of them don't meet in person at all. It's just simply a virtual relationship.
Hmm.
So, so so I do think that, if your kids are coming to you and saying, well, I won't have friends and I'll be isolated and whatever, whatever, it's simply not true. And you have to help them work through that instead of just giving it to them to make them comfortable.
Hmm. I do think one of those negative aspects of social media and the technology that we have is exactly what you said. It's a lot easier to just push a button and write what you want to say instead of having that difficult conversation with somebody or that conversation that's going to make you uncomfortable.
That's right. Yes. And what's happening to the kids today is that they're not developing quality, intimate relationships because they're just so separated online and they think that's a relationship.
Hmm. I think relationships can stem from that, but you also have to have that physical communication. You have to, when you're actually physically with somebody, you have to put the phone down. You can't be there has to be like that connection of you're communicating to each other, not via a device or anything like that.
That's right. Yes, I agree. I think, obviously people meet online. That's how I met my husband, was on Match.com actually, when Match.com was first started and nobody was doing it and it was considered weird. And I did it because I lived in a suburb, so that wasn't much of a social life. And I'm a social worker. So all of my coworkers were women. And I
Hmm.
wasn't meeting men. And I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to meet my husband if I don't do this. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think, meeting online is fine. But I also think kids don't need to meet online because they're in social groups, they're in school, they're in activities. That's how they can meet people.
Hmm.
So yeah, absolutely. We need
It,
that in-person connection.
it's funny because I use that example because that's exactly what happened to me and my wife as well. Because we met when I was in Japan, and so I'm on a military base, and all you know are the military people that are there, and it's very limited, selection of people, and you're like, well, I want something different. So you kind of had to do something different, and if you wanted to meet anybody.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's good that we have that modality for that purpose.
What advice could you offer to help parents or educators support mental health and well-being in the youth?
I think I can't stress it enough that we need to understand child development from all facets, from physical development to brain development to social emotional to even a spiritual development. Because if we let them go through developmental processes naturally, now that's not saying we can't make mistakes. We're always going to make mistakes. But if we get out of their way and let them develop the way they need to in every stage, then we will prevent so much mental illness. And the other thing that we can do is focus on their nutrition.
Mhm.
That's such a big part that's missing. My kids, my husband knows that I love this rant where there's kids, there's junk food, and it drives me crazy. And look, I'm the 80-20%. I'm not extreme. I think, 80% of the time we should be eating healthy, and 20% of the time, sure, you want to splurge on some pizza and some cupcakes, great, good for you. But that's not what's happening to these kids. They're being inundated with junk food daily.
Mhm.
And I mean, to the point where they're being, my daughter's third grade class, the teacher would do what's called Hershey Kiss practice every day. And she would ask them a series of questions, and it was a game. And every time they answered a question, she would throw a Hershey Kiss at them. And my daughter sometimes would get like 5 or 6 Hershey Kisses, like every day. And so this isn't moderation. This
Mhm.
isn't, teaching them anything good about health. And what people don't realize is that actually affects their mental health because that causes gut inflammation, and gut inflammation leads to brain inflammation. And when your brain's inflamed, it's not going to work,
Mhm.
right? Your executive functioning, by the way, doesn't develop until 25. So you're literally like fighting not just the fact that you don't have full executive functioning, which is decision making and attention and focus and memory. You don't really have that fully, but then now your brain's inflamed, and so you don't have it at all. And we wonder why there's so much ADD and a lack of focus with these kids. So much can change, I think, even just from changing their diets, changing how they eat. And again, not completely restricting the junk food, but not throwing 6 Hershey Kisses at them every day.
Mhm. So one of the things my wife and I started doing was we started recognizing that they're getting a lot of candy, and it's like, and it's not like we're pretty ingredient conscious, so we look at it and you're like, wow, this is like first off terrible ingredients. Second off,
Yeah,
they're getting this all the time. So what we did was we have a system so where they're still polite to whoever gives them candy, but they don't eat it in class. They bring it home and they get to switch it out with one of our we have a box of actually good candy or sweets or anything, and take they can switch it out from there. So they can still enjoy the food and the junk food at times, but we also know what's going in their body too. And they're aware of it too. They're reading the ingredients too at 8 years old.
that's great. That's really good. Yeah, because you don't want to, I often will talk about how you don't want to make them so conscious that they develop like eating issues or eating disorders, but you certainly want to make them aware and cognizant of how it makes them feel. So what I try to do with my kids is just talk about how is it making you feel? How is it affecting you? And they're both actually finally, I mean, they're getting older, so they're finally learning that, it actually it helps them with school. It helps them focus better if they're balancing it out. My thing is just balance it out, like
Hmm.
eat some broccoli every once in a while.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think, it essentially it's not as complicated. The answer isn't as complicated as people think it is, but it's hard to do.
Hmm.
So if we want better mental health, we have to do the hard thing by having boundaries over what's hindering them from developing naturally.
So one of the things that I know that I mentioned at the beginning, that you are working on is you have a webinar coming up. It's on the 15th of this month. So this episode is going to air after that. But could we get a sneak peek into what it is, and is this going to be something that you do often?
Yep. So this is with a colleague of mine. Her name is Miriam Mandel. She's a pediatrician and parent coach. And we had met on LinkedIn. So here we go with meeting, wonderful people online. And we just have very similar philosophies on how parents can help kids. So a lot of what I'm talking about, she's in agreement with. She talks a lot about similar things. And so we decided to get together and offer a free workshop because we want to help parents with particularly anxiety. We see a big problem with it among this generation of kids, but we wanted to turn the word anxiety into something positive. So we're actually talking about confidence because the way to
Mm.
remedy anxiety is to build confidence and self-assuredness and self-trust. So this free workshop initially is to help parents, one, understand child development, like I've been talking about. Miriam's going to talk about the brain from a medical standpoint. I'm going to talk about the social emotional development. Because once we can understand development, we can help them build their confidence. And what we've noticed is the anxiety is actually really hyper focused on their futures. Many parents are anxious about what's going to happen to their kids, what college they're going to go to, what careers they're going to pick. Are they going to make enough money? Because inflation has made life so expensive. And so we really want to help address that. If there's confidence, if there's self-assuredness, if there's self-trust, their futures are going to be just fine. And parents need to be comfortable with that because their anxiety is kind of trickling down onto the kids. So we want to introduce the topic. We want to explain child development in this free workshop. And then we're going to offer a paid workshop that we get more in depth with. And then we're going to have breakout sessions where I'm going to take kids between 0 and 12, and she's going to take teenagers, and parents are going to be able to ask us direct questions about some of the things they struggle with.
That honestly is awesome. I'm excited because I'm going to be there. I've already got it
Great.
marked in my calendar, so I'm going to definitely be there. And then is this a one-time thing, or are you going to do this every month, or what does that look like?
Well, we're going to see with the level of interest for this free workshop. And then if there's people who want to pay for more in-depth, then we'll do one of those and sort of see how that goes. And we don't really have plans to continue it on, but we have agreed that we are really liking working together. And so I absolutely see us continuing on if there's interest.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so now that we are nearing the end of the episode, I have three questions which I ask all guests, one question over each topic of the podcast, which is live, love, and grow. So the first question that I have for you is, what advice can you share about how to create a life that leaves a positive impact on the world?
I think maintaining our connections to each other will just inevitably be a positive thing because even if we are connected if we're connected, even if we have bad feelings, we can sort of help each other work through that.
Awesome. Second question is, what are some practical ways people can cultivate self-love?
By doing hard things, um, by working through uh, whatever challenge is at hand, because once you do that, you can look back, and while it was really painful going through it, you can say, look at me, I did that. And that helps to foster that inner sense of I'm good enough.
And my final question is, what is one actionable tip someone can do today to grow 1% better?
I think that we can make ourselves uncomfortable
Mm,
every day. And even if you have a day where everything's easy, or you don't see where you can make yourself uncomfortable, then that's an opportunity to ask yourself, well, what do I need? What do I need to do to grow? What can I do that makes me not just content, but working through something?
mhm. I remember reading an exercise. I don't know who did it. I don't know if it was Lewis Howes or if it was one of his guests, but he said they would make a list of everything that they're afraid of. And each day they would look at it and be like, okay, I'm going to work on this today. And they would do something in that, whatever that fear or uncomfortableness was, and they were going to work on that so they didn't feel that anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is really awesome.
So, how can people connect with you?
So I am on LinkedIn as Nicole Runyon. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at iGeneration Mental Health. And I do have a website, NicoleRunyon.com. It's under construction. It will be completely done April 19th, I believe. So, yeah.
And then, how can people support you on your journey?
I am always interested in talking to parents wherever they are. So whether that's in a school or a church or a community, or even a company or a convention of some kind, I really am interested in speaking to large audiences and getting my message out there. And I also do take on individual parents for coaching if they're looking for help with changing some of the things going on with their kids.
Fantastic. Well, Nicole, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for being here on the podcast and all the great work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. We connected on LinkedIn for that exact reason. That exact reason is we both care about the kids and we care about noticing that the parents have to be involved for the kids to grow. And I just want to acknowledge you for all of that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast. I look forward to seeing you next week. Don't forget to live, love, and grow to be the best version of you. Oh, and one more thing. If you or a young man that you know suffer from victim mindset or are not reaching their fullest potential, then visit mattfendora.com to see how we can work together to become the best version of ourselves. That's mattfendora.com. The link will be in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you and have an outstanding day.